What's going on, guys? It's Coan with Athletics. Today I want to take some time to walk through one of my favorite pivot pickoff modifications, especially for guys that are on the taller end of the spectrum and are typically going to have the longer wingspans or the longer levers to essentially rotate through the axis of rotation. With that, we have to account for the fact that the humerus has to rotate through this axis, and essentially as we get on the taller end of the spectrum and we're trying to perform the same traditional pivot pickoff where we're completely closed off to the wall, essentially what we're going to see is that guys are going to instead be driving elbow extension, elbow in front of the midline, and essentially get that fishing action rather than driving the transition from horizontal abduction to adduction. So what I have here is an example, and what I want us to do is kind of key in on some of the key components of the movement. Ultimately, the idea behind a pivot pickoff is that we're essentially trying to back chain the arm action and transition that into the rest of our plyo care drills or our throwing drills. So we're trying to transition that from the pivot pickoffs to the roll into the rocker to the walking windup and ultimately into flat ground throwing or the mound. But ultimately, as we try to shorten up our arm, there is a too short position and there is a too long position. So we have to find our way somewhere on that spectrum. We don't want to lean too far though on the too short, and that's a lot of times what I'm going to see with guys that do have longer wingspans and try to perform the traditional version of this drill. So with that, I'm going to show you before and after clip, and these are actually only one throw apart, and you're going to see the differences. We're going to key in on a few important factors and kind of go from there. So with the first example, we're going to demonstrate a traditional pivot pickoff, and then I'm going to show you the modified version that we used with this particular athlete. Jed is 6'3", he has a 6'4" wingspan, so he is on the taller end of the spectrum, and that's particularly why we made this modification. So what I want you to notice is, in the traditional sense, we're squared off completely to the wall where he's throwing, and with that, I want you to notice a few things. So I want you to notice how close the ball gets to the head. I want you to notice the position his elbow is flexed at here, and then I also want you to notice essentially how his humerus has a tendency to be above the shoulder angle here. And then, really important, and this is probably the most important component, I want you to notice how he transitions from this flipped up position here, and I want you to notice where his elbow goes. It doesn't go around, it actually elevates. What that's going to do is be a precursor to fishing your arm, getting your elbow in front of the midline, and essentially driving elbow extension. And so again, check that out. So his position here, and then watch it climb. So it's climbing on the back end there, and then we're not going to be able to really load into our pec and drive that abduction, horizontal abduction component into the adduction component. So really loading our pec back and being able to fire through that. We're instead going to be climbing above and really getting away from being able to load and drive through the pec. So then let's go to the modified version. So I want you to notice we have his feet open about 18 inches. These are actually only one throw apart and no additional cueing or anything special like that. Essentially just opening these up, and I want you to see how much better his arm is set up to rotate through the axis. So with that, start kind of progressing these through, and I want you to notice how, one, he's able to load his pec better, so he's getting more horizontal abduction here because he's able to essentially close off more. And I want you to notice the fact that in this position, how far the ball is away from the head. I want you to notice where he is as far as at his elbow flexion, and then from there, I want you to notice the fact that he is completely in line. Okay, so his humerus is in line with his shoulder angle or his shoulder tilt. And then last thing, big thing we were keying on, is I want you to notice where this elbow goes. Watch it push right through that point. Watch it push right through that point here, rather than climb. And so again, if we go back to the first one, just for reference, I want you to go back a couple. If I put that dot here, I want you to watch his elbow climb over that dot, rather than, if we go back to the second clip, watch it push through this dot right there. So he's really able to load through his pec, get the adduction component that we're really looking for. And so this is a big drill modification for guys that are on the taller end of the spectrum. And with that, I think it really is important that we note that traditional drills are great, but they really just provide a structure for us to perform back chaining and really work through the arm action in the lower half. The reality is we're really going to need to customize these drills for each individual. We're not going to fit the athlete into the drills. We're going to fit the drills to the athlete, and that's where the customization component goes in. That's what we do for our guys, and this is really just the start of it. Obviously something as simple as a pivot pickoff, but it's amazing what this is going to cause down the chain as we continue to work through his arm action and essentially getting him in better positions and working him toward throwing his highest velo possible. So the question I'm going to get from you is, how do I identify this in my own pivot pickoffs? So easy ways are the key components that I went over: the hand position relative to the head, the elbow flexion, the humerus relative to the shoulder tilt, and whether your elbow is climbing over or your elbow is actually driving through the positions of horizontal abduction to adduction. With that, what I want you to notice is the position in the first example and the position in the second example. And I want to notice how the elbow kind of transitions during this. And so in the first one, you're going to notice this elbow shoot forward. So he's going to get in this deep flexed position here. So he's going to be driving a lot more elbow extension rather than that transition that we're looking for. And if you go into the second clip, I want you to notice how much less flexion he has. And essentially what's happening is he's actually rotating around, so he's getting the horizontal component rather than rotating and driving his elbow through and just driving pure extension. He's actually going through and around that axis. And what that's allowing him to do is essentially drive through the pec rather than driving through the tricep. And that's going to be particularly relevant because we're not going to want this to kind of propagate down the line as we move into other drills and ultimately onto the mound. All right, guys, appreciate you checking out the content. If you liked it, leave a like below. If you haven't subscribed to our channel already, go ahead and do that. And if for more information and content just like this, check me out at @TreadWiz on Twitter and Instagram. Going to be coming out with a lot of new videos, so go ahead and check that out and give me a follow.